I want to show you something here. See if you can spot the pattern here. A few days ago, Donald Trump appointed a new spokesperson for the Defense Department. His name is Sean Parnell. If that name sounds at all familiar, it's because the last thing he did in politics was fail in his effort to win a U.S. Senate seat from Pennsylvania. Mr. Parnell dropped out of the Republican primary after a judge took away custody of his children and ruled that Mr. Parnell had been violent and abusive toward the children and his wife. His wife had accused him, among other things, of throwing chairs at her, of dropping her off on an interstate on the side of the road when she was 6 months pregnant and telling her to get an abortion. She accused him of choking and strangling her. He denies the allegations, but that all came out during the campaign. And after the judge's ruling in that case, Mr. Parnell dropped out of the Republican primary, and he thus failed to win that U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania. That is the last thing that Sean Parnell did in public life. That's the last thing he did in politics. Now Donald Trump has named him spokesman for the Pentagon. Person who won that Republican primary for that Senate seat in Pennsylvania and then lost the Senate race in the general election, that was Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz. Trump has now named him to run Medicare and Medicaid. So that was the Pennsylvania Senate seat. In the Georgia Senate races, there were 4 different Republicans who lost while trying to get Senate seats from Georgia in 2020 and 2022, who have all now been named to things in the Trump administration. Kelly Loeffler lost a Georgia Senate race in 2020. Trump named her to head the Small Business Administration. David Perdue lost a Georgia Senate race in 2020. Trump named him to be ambassador to China. Doug Collins lost in the primary for Georgia Senate in 2020. Trump named him to run the VA. Herschel Walker lost a Georgia Senate race in 2022. Trump named him to be ambassador to the Bahamas. Carrie Lake lost her run for Arizona governor in 2022, and then she lost her run for Arizona senator in 2024. Trump just named her to run the Voice of America. Lori Chavez DeRemer lost her House seat in 2024 in Oregon. Trump named her to run the U.S. Labor Department. Brandon Williams lost his House seat in 2024 in New York. Trump named him to run the National Nuclear Security Administration. God help us all. Lee Zeldin lost his race for New York governor. Trump named him to run the EPA. Caroline Leavitt lost her campaign for a congressional seat in New Hampshire. Trump named her White House press secretary. The only thing wrestling executive Linda McMahon ever did in politics was lose 2 consecutive U.S. Senate races in Connecticut. Trump named her Secretary of Education. The last thing Tulsi Gabbard ever did in politics was disastrously lose a presidential run in 2020. Trump has named her Director of National Intelligence, which is like a horse walks into a bar joke without a horse or a bar. The only thing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. ever did in politics was run and then quit a presidential campaign this year. Now he's Trump's nominee to lead Health and Human Services. Who is Harmeet Dillon? Harmeet Dillon lost a race for Republican Party chair this year. Then Trump named her to lead the Justice Department Civil Rights Division. Sam Brown lost a Nevada Senate race this year. Trump has put him at the VA. Dave Weldon lost a race for state legislator in Florida. Trump has now named him to lead the CDC. Dan Bishop lost the Attorney General's race in North Carolina this past year. Trump has made him the number 2 official at OMB. Bo Hines just lost a congressional race in North Carolina, so Trump put him on his new crypto board. Joe Kent has lost 2 consecutive races for Congress in Washington state. Trump just named him head of the National Counterterrorism Center. You noticing a theme here? I mean, I could go on, but are you noticing a theme? I mean, people keep saying no one elected Elon Musk, and that is definitely true. But, you know, at least in his case, he didn't try. He didn't run for something and have the people resoundingly say, no, we don't want you. We'd prefer someone else and not you. And so you will lose this race. But in this second term, they really are stuffing the whole administration with people who have not just once upon a time lost an election here or there. All politicians at some point usually lose something. No, This is like the last thing you did was lose a thing. They almost seem to be going out of their way to find people for whom the last thing they did in politics, the last thing they did in public life was ask the public to approve of them. And the public said, no, we do not want you. It's almost as if they are going out of their way to say, oh, you, the people, are saying no. We say that doesn't matter because you may not want us. You may not want this. You may not want us. But this is who and what you're getting, and you're stuck with it. Doris Kearns Goodwin wrote her famous, brilliant book about Abraham Lincoln building his, brave, capable government out of a team of rivals. With Trump, it's like a big team of losers, people who the American people explicitly do not want. People who just had the opportunity to be voted into office by the American people. And the American people said definitively, no, don't want you. And so Trump is saying, well, that's who you're getting, and you'll like it. How many of these folks can I find? So there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on every day. But so as to not get too overwhelmed with the pace of things, with I think what we're all experiencing as this torrent of bad news, I do think it's possible to recognize that not everything sort of fits in the same bucket. Not all of these things are the same, right? So in one category, I would put, bad outcomes, right? Plane crashes, bird flu jumping species and sparking new outbreaks. American farmers having been told by the government that if they install new fencing and dig a new well and upgrade their electrical, the government will subsidize that, will reimburse them for doing that. Now that those American farmers have spent that money, the Trump administration has decided they're not, in fact, paying them for it. So now those farmers are potentially going to go bankrupt, right? The shuttering of programs that prevent the spread of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, programs that stop famines, programs that test cancer drugs and all the rest. All of these things are bad outcomes. I mean, I would even say like Charles Kushner, that's a bad outcome, right? Having a convicted felon as the ambassador to one of our most important allies, that itself is bad. Rod Blagojevich, that's bad. Pardoning politicians for profound and proven corruption, that's just a bad outcome on its face. So that's one category. Say there's a second category, which is self-dealing and abuse of office. We're going to talk this hour about some of the amazing benefits that Donald Trump's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, is getting for himself and his companies now that Trump has let him take over running the government. There's things like, the inherently worthless Trump meme coin on which he's made tens of millions of dollars already, thanks to the suckers who are willing to pay for it, right? There's all that. Like there's the bad outcomes. There's the self-dealing and corruption. I'd say those are the first two categories. But the thing that we're going to focus on tonight, and that I think, in a good sense, I think a lot of the country is starting to focus on right now, is a different category. It's not just a bad outcome. It's not just self-dealing and corruption. It's a third category that poses the risk of what I would call autocratic breakthrough. That's like the political science term for it. It's not just something turning out bad. It's not just you doing things in a way that is corrupt or for your own self rather than for the people you're supposed to be serving. It is breaking systems so that you can't be stopped. It's when they do things with their power that aren't just bad, that aren't just corrupt or self-dealing. They're designed to change the government and the country and the system so they can never be removed from power. So opposition to them becomes impossible or illegal or dangerous. So it doesn't matter what we want or what we don't want. It doesn't matter what we intend to vote for or vote against. They're staying anyway, and they'll do what they want regardless of how the rest of the country feels about it. That's autocratic breakthrough. And in that category, there's stuff to watch. The attacks on the media are not important because you have to like the media. They're important because without the media, the public's not going to know things the government doesn't want them to know. The attacks on the inspectors general and the oversight agencies, they're not necessarily important because you have to love the inspectors general and the oversight agencies. But again, it's a categorical change. In taking out the inspectors general and the oversight agencies, these guys are protecting themselves from being investigated or being stopped by those watchdogs, but they're also preventing the public from knowing about whatever malfeasance may be going on. And in that category, the autocratic breakthrough category, the changing the system so we can't be removed from office, so that we can act without regard for what the American people want or say or do. In that category, the big kahuna is the attack on the courts. You may have seen the headline tonight. We had a federal judge block the big cuts they just imposed on scientific and medical research. The amount of scientific and medical research funding and the way that funding is structured is set up by law. And to cut it unilaterally is to violate that law. So those scientific and medical research cuts have been blocked tonight by a federal judge. We've also had a federal judge block the resign or else threats against millions of federal workers that are trying to induce them into quitting their jobs. That has been blocked by a federal judge. We've had a federal judge block the Elon Musk improper access to the Treasury's payment system. That has been blocked by a federal judge. We've had a federal judge block their efforts to send 3 Venezuelan men to Guantanamo. We had a federal judge block the release of the names of FBI agents who worked on January 6th cases. We've had 3 different judges block the effort to overturn birthright citizenship, the American principle enshrined in the Constitution that says if you're born here, you're American. We have had 2 federal judges now block the government funding halt. We have had a federal judge block the shutdown of USAID and the order that everybody at USAID has to be fired or put on leave. We've had judges stop thing after thing after thing that they've been trying to do. And all of those losses in court, I mean, we're only 3 weeks into the administration. How have they lost in court this many times already? Well, it's because they're doing a lot of things all at once that seem, at least at first glance, to be quite illegal. And so judges are stopping them from doing these things as fast as lawsuits can be filed. But the important thing here is the response to these court orders, because in, for example, the funding halt case, where the judges are saying you cannot halt these funds have to go ahead. In the USAID case, where the judge says you cannot shut USAID and put the whole staff on leave, you have to reverse that. In those cases already, we have had the new administration lose in court. And we have also had the new administration appear to defy those court orders. In both cases, the plaintiffs have gone back to court in those cases saying, Your Honor, your ruling is not being obeyed. They're still doing what you ordered them not to do. And that has bad consequences, true, right? Directly. There's a reason these cases were brought in the first place, which is you can't do this illegal thing. And also, if you do this thing, it causes harm. So the fact that they're defying the court orders directly has bad consequences. USAID still being shut has bad consequences. Those funding halts still have bad consequences. But categorically, the most important thing here is their willingness to defy the courts, because that is the ultimate autocratic breakthrough. A declaration that the rule of law does not apply to them, that it cannot constrain anything they want to do. That is worse than any one outcome, right? That is a forever decision. That means nothing anyone else wants and no court ever rules will ever again have any impact on what our government wants to do to us. That is a category of its own. That is the key to autocratic breakthrough. And that is where we find ourselves on the precipice, looking over the edge tonight. It's hard to believe, but it was still January when Donald Trump fired the inspector generals, 18 different government agencies. He fired the inspectors general illegally because, among other things, you're not allowed to fire an IG without giving Congress 30 days notice before you do it. One of those inspectors general was this woman. Her name is Phyllis Fong. She's the inspector general for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Phyllis Fong is a nonpartisan technocratic official. She was appointed by President George W. Bush more than 22 years ago. She has served under Democratic and Republican presidents ever since. But when Phyllis Fong learned that she had been fired along with all the other inspectors general, she, like everyone, I think, recognized that the announcement of her firing was illegal on its face. And if an announcement is illegal, you might reasonably conclude that it's therefore non-binding. Therefore, the day after Donald Trump announced that she and 17 other inspectors general were fired, Phyllis Fong nevertheless showed up for work. She showed up for work the next day, just like she had done for the past 2 decades. According to Reuters, Ms. Fong said her firing was not legal, and so she was going back to work. Initial reporting said they then bodily escorted her out of the office. USDA then disputed that and said, no, she left of her own accord. Either way, she didn't make it easy for them. Her firing really does appear to have been blatantly illegal, so she did not accept it, and she still showed up. We're seeing other stories along these lines, individual acts of showing up or speaking up throughout the federal government. When Trump ordered federal agencies to get rid of any references to gender ideology, whatever that means, and demanded that federal workers must resign en masse or else, one administrative judge at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission sent an email to the new Trump-appointed acting boss of that agency, and she CC'd pretty much everybody else in the building on that email. The email included a reference to the president's top campaign donor, Elon Musk, the wannabe occupant of Mars. The email said, quote, "These tactics you are employing and the actions you have taken are illegal and unconstitutional. Quote, if upon reflection you feel like now would be a good time to take a vacation and resign from your position, please reply all to this email and put in the subject line, quote, I'd like to occupy Mars." The acting head of the EEOC apparently did not do that. Nevertheless, credit for the question. Humor, determination, showing up, speaking out. Tonight we have with us 2 of the high-ranking, big-deal government officials who have thus far stood up to Trump and what he's done. First, we are going to speak with Ellen Weintraub. She has been a member of the Federal Elections Commission since 2002. She has chaired the commission 4 times. This week, President Trump attempted to fire her. Ms. Weintraub responded in a post on Twitter, quote, "Received a letter from POTUS today purporting to remove me as commissioner and chair of the FEC. She said, quote, "There's a legal way to replace FEC commissioners. This isn't it. I've been lucky to serve the American people and stir up some good trouble along the way. That's not changing anytime soon." Joining us now is Ellen Weintraub, chair of the Federal Elections Commission, who Trump claims to have fired. She begs to differ. Commissioner Weintraub, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here, Rachel.
Why do you say this firing was not legal?
Well, if you look at the Federal Election Campaign Act, there is nothing in there about removing FEC commissioners other than in the normal course, which is you can replace them when their terms have expired by appointing a new commissioner who gets confirmed by the Senate. That's the way you replace FEC commissioners. There's nothing in there that says, or if the president doesn't like that particular person, they can just be fired.
So now that the president has sent you this letter purporting to remove you, but under terms in which he's not legally allowed to remove you, I imagine that you consider yourself to still be a commissioner. But how does this get settled? How do you plan to move forward here?
Well, I'm still considering all of my options at the moment, but I will tell you that my email has been turned off, my computers have been taken, my pass, I believe, no longer gets me into the building.
When you say your computers have been taken, meaning removed from your office?
Well, I think they're still in my office, actually, but I can't get into my office anymore.
I see. Do you think it is Trump's intention to dismantle the FEC in a fundamental sense, to rebuild it in his own image? I mean, we've seen him wholesale fire all different kinds of officials that he's not allowed to fire. Some people are suing. Some people are trying to show up to work anyway. You say that you're considering your options. Do you have an understanding or even an informed theory as to what you think the end goal is here?
I really don't know. At the moment, there are still 4 sitting commissioners, so there is a bare quorum. There is supposed to be 6, no more than 3 from any one political party. It's supposed to be an independent, bipartisan commission, and the chairmanship rotates from one party to the next every year. The Republicans always get the election year, and that means the year after the election year, there's usually a Democrat who is in the chair, and it just happened to be my turn, and I was duly elected by my colleagues, and that's why I should be still sitting in the chair. But right now, there are still 4 remaining commissioners, so he has not disabled entirely the commission yet, but this is not the way an independent agency is supposed to work. This is not the kind of agency where, unlike many other agencies in government, he doesn't get to come in and immediately put in his own chair of the agency. That just isn't the way the place was set up. It was designed by Congress to ensure against political machinations that would interfere with the running of the agency. And that is why Congress set it up so that if a commissioner term has expired, they can stay until they get replaced by another commissioner, so the seat doesn't go vacant. And that gives the Senate an opportunity for advice and consent. In this case, since mine is a Democratic seat, it should give the Democratic leaders in Congress an opportunity to weigh in on who they think ought to be sitting in the seat. And it has never, in the 50-year history of this commission, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, this has never happened before.
It's never happened before. And there's been so much partisan fighting over the FEC. And there's been so much like bad faith fighting over the FEC by various political factions over the years, and in other circumstances in which I have interviewed you on television about those shenanigans. But this is something that's never happened before. You know, if he does remove more commissioners, if he is trying to disable the FEC, can you explain to our viewers in plain language what that would mean if the FEC effectively went away, if he was able to shut down the functioning of the commission?
The FEC is the agency that was designed to follow the money and give the American people transparency about who is funding political campaigns at the federal level and what they do with that money. And if the FEC can't do its job, then the public is left in the dark. There is already too much dark money in our system, and without an FEC, there would be even more. Basically, all of it would be dark, and there would be no one out there to enforce the law. If they leave the staff in place, they can keep the database up and running, but the staff is not capable under the law, without the commissioners there, of enforcing the law in any meaningful way, in any way at all, if somebody violates the law. It's a law enforcement agency, and the law ought to be followed. The agency needs to be there to enforce the law, and the laws ought to be followed in the ways that the commission is constituted.
Ellen Weintraub, chair of the Federal Elections Commissioner, longtime commissioner on the FEC. Ellen, I don't know. As you say, you're keeping your options open in terms of how you plan to move forward here now that the president purports to have fired you by means he's not allowed to fire you by. But please keep us apprised and come back to let us know what you decide. Ellen Weintraub, chair of the Federal Elections Commission, thank you for joining us.